I knew something was wrong the moment my mother-in-law handed me that glass. "Special drink for my favorite son, in-law," she said with a tight smile, her eyes flickering nervously to the kitchen doorway. I smiled back, but something about the way she gripped the glass, too careful, too rehearsed, sent a chill down my spine. I didn't make a scene. I just switched the glass with her husband's when no one was looking. 45 minutes later, he was clutching his stomach, drenched in sweat, and vomiting violently in the guest bathroom. My name is Nathan Calloway, and I'm a 32-year-old freelance photographer based in Boulder, Colorado. I've spent the last decade building my career. Magazine spreads, wildlife shoots, and travel photography assignments that pay the bills if you're good enough. And I am. But to my in-laws, especially Carol and Walter Henderson, what I do has never counted as real work. Every Sunday dinner with them is a game of veiled jabs and patronizing remarks. Walter measures a man by his 40 wunk and how many zeros are on his W-2. Carol smiles while asking when I'll settle into something more stable. They never approved of me marrying their daughter, Emily, no matter how deeply we love each other. But last weekend, something changed. Carol didn't just try to sabotage my reputation. She tried to drown. I caught her without saying a word. I realized something. I wasn't just the outsider anymore. I was the threat they couldn't control. And I was done playing nice. I met Emily 6 years ago at a local art gallery in Denver, where some of my wildlife photographs were on display. She was finishing her master's in environmental science, brilliant, grounded, and kind. We clicked instantly. She loved that I saw the world through a lens. I admired how fiercely she cared about the planet. We built something solid together. But her parents, that was a different story. From the very first dinner at their house, I could feel the weight of judgment. Her father, Walter Henderson, an investment banker with a towering ego and a closet full of Brooks Brothers suits, made no effort to hide his disdain. "So how's the little photography hobby going?" He'd ask while cutting into his filet mignon, never waiting for an answer. Her mother, Carol, was subtler but sharper. She'd introduce me at family functions as Emily's photographer friend, never her husband. She'd compliment my work, then immediately ask when I planned to settle down with a real job. Every Sunday dinner at their colonial home in the upscale part of town felt like a performance. I'd bring expensive wine. I'd talk about major clients, National Geographic Outside magazine, but it never mattered. In their eyes, I was a man chasing a dream that didn't fit into their world of balance sheets and country club brunches. When Emily and I told them we were trying for a baby, Walter pulled me aside in the hallway. "Kids are expensive, son," he said. "You might want to think about finding something more stable before you bring one into this world." He said it like advice, but his eyes made it clear. It was a warning. Still, I said nothing to Emily. She loved her parents. I didn't want to force her into the impossible position of choosing between me and them. I held my tongue. I kept smiling. I endured being cut out of family photos, being left out of conversations, being treated like a house guest instead of a family member. But over time, the signs got harder to ignore. The way Carol would ask Emily to join her in the kitchen anytime I mentioned a big assignment. The dismissive way Walter referred to my career as a phase. The constant comparisons to Dr. Thomas Carter, Emily's ex-fiancé, the one they always thought she should have married. Even then, I tried to believe they'd come around. That one day I'd prove I was more than just the artsy guy with a camera. But what I didn't realize, what I didn't want to admit, was that they weren't just skeptical. They were actively working to push me out. And on Carol's birthday, when I saw her quietly slip something into my drink, while pretending to be cheerful and gracious, I knew we'd crossed into a different kind of war. They didn't just disapprove of me. They wanted me gone. The night Walter ran to the bathroom, pale and sweating, the house filled with the unmistakable sounds of someone violently ill, I didn't say a word. I sat quietly, eating my dessert while Carol, my mother-in-law, stared at me from across the table, her face drained of color. She knew. And I knew she knew. I didn't storm out or make a scene. Instead, I excused myself, carefully slipped the untouched glass, the one she had clearly tampered with, into my camera bag, and went home with Emily, who was too worried about her father to notice my silence. The next morning, I called Jason, a former client who now ran a toxicology lab. I need a personal favor, I told him. Discreet. When I delivered the glass, I gave no context. He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask. 3 days later, he called benzodiazepines. Not enough to kill you, but definitely enough to knock someone out for hours. Where did you get this? I didn't answer. Instead, I began digging. Through public records and pharmacy databases, I discovered Carol had active prescriptions for Xanax from 3 different doctors. She wasn't just medicating, she was stockpiling. Quiet rumors from their country club started surfacing, erratic behavior at a gala, missing jewelry after a luncheon. Whispers the family had tried to bury. I compiled everything, prescriptions, toxicology reports, testimonies, into a folder and waited. My chance came a week later when Emily mentioned her mom wanted new headshots for her online brand. She specifically asked if you would take them, she said. I forced a smile. Of course. I arrived at their home with my gear in that folder. Walter wasn't home. Carol greeted me warmly, wearing an expensive blouse and fake sincerity. Before we start, I said, handing her the envelope, I think you should read this. She read in silence. First the toxicology report, then the prescription records. Her hands trembled. This is absurd, she whispered. I would never. Why, both know that's not true. I interrupted calmly. But what I don't understand is why. Her expression changed in an instant, from guilt to ice, cold condescension. You're not good enough for my daughter, she said flatly. You never were. A man should offer security, not snapshots. I wasn't trying to hurt you, just make you miss your little gallery show, so Emily could finally see who you really are. Unreliable. I didn't flinch. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to tell Walter what you did. Then both of you are going to start treating me with basic respect. Not because you believe I deserve it, but because the alternative is Emily finding out everything. All of it. She tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. She'd never believe you over us. I nodded toward my camera bag. You sure about that? Because the lab report doesn't lie, and neither do pharmacy records. And if you really want to roll the dice, I'm sure the neighbors you've alienated over the years have stories they'd love to tell. I didn't take a single photo that day. But I left with something far more important: leverage, and the beginning of the end of her control. A week passed. Emily barely spoke to me. She visited her parents alone, came back with tired eyes and doubt she didn't voice, but I could feel it settle like a storm between us. I buried myself in editing, shooting, anything to avoid thinking about how easily I'd been cast as the villain in a narrative I didn't create. Then, out of nowhere, a plain brown envelope arrived. No return address, just my name scrawled in loopy handwriting. Inside a USB drive and a handwritten note from Lauren, my brother-in-law's wife. You should see this. When I opened the files on my laptop, I froze. The security footage from Walter and Carol's home showed everything. Carol in the kitchen, tilting a vial over a glass, her movements too precise to be innocent. Then me entering, offering to help, switching the glasses, and Walter drinking from the one she had prepared. It was irrefutable. But the real bombshell came later in the footage, after we'd left. Carol screaming at Walter, "Why did you drink it? That wasn't for you." His reply stopped me cold. This isn't the first time you've pulled something like this. I watched the clips 3 times, heart pounding. The second video showed them arguing again, days later. He knows what you did, Walter said. Let him. Carol replied. Emily will never believe him over us. I've already started planting doubts about their marriage. She'll think it's her idea when she files for divorce. That wasn't control. That was sabotage, deliberate. Surgical manipulation designed to isolate Emily from anyone they couldn't dominate. I called Lauren immediately. Why did you send this to me? Because they tried to do the same to me, she whispered. Told Owen I wasn't good enough. Tried to break us up for years. I kept quiet because, well, I wasn't sure anyone would believe me. But I can't let them do it to you too. The next day, Walter texted me we should talk. Man to man. No wives. We met at his golf club. He offered me bourbon and a fake smile. Families are complicated, he said. My wife's a little passionate. She didn't mean any harm. I have the footage, I said quietly. She meant harm. His face darkened instantly. What do you want? Money? We know your type. You married up. Emily always falls for these projects. I want you to stop interfering in our marriage, I replied. No more lies. No more manipulation. Emily always comes home. He smirked. Ask her about Thomas, or the fiancé before you. That night, I called Beth, Emily's college roommate. When I asked about Thomas, she didn't hesitate. Her parents ruined that too, she said. Planted fake texts, convinced her he was cheating. By the time she realized it was too late, it all clicked. They weren't just overbearing, they were experts at controlling narratives. But now I had proof, footage, witnesses, patterns. It was time for Emily to finally see the truth. Not told by me, but shown, unfiltered, undeniable. I invited Lauren and Owen over for dinner. Emily didn't know what was coming. When dessert was served, I connected my laptop to the TV and said calmly, "There's something you both need to see." And I pressed play. The night had come. I invited Owen and Lauren, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, over for dinner, along with Emily, my wife. She didn't know yet, but by the end of dessert, everything she believed about her parents would change. I'd compiled the evidence. Footage from security cameras, audio clips, doctored messages, even a few testimonies from people Carol and Walter had quietly pushed out of Emily's life over the years. It was all organized on a flash drive. After we ate, I connected my laptop to the TV. I looked at Owen and Lauren, then at Emily. "There's something I need to show you," I said. "Something I didn't want to tell you. I wanted you to see it for yourself." I hit play. First, the clip of Carol in the kitchen, slipping something into my drink. Then me switching glasses and Walter downing what was meant for me. Emily sat frozen, hands pressed together, face pale. Owen muttered, That can't be right." Lauren reached over, gripped his arm. "They did the same thing to us," she said softly. "Tried to break us up for years. Told Owen I wasn't good enough. It almost worked." Emily's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't look away. Then came the recording from a few days after the dinner. Walter yelling, "This isn't the first time you've done something like this." And Carol calmly replying, "She'll never choose him over us. By the time I'm done, she'll think filing for divorce was her own idea." Emily's lip trembled. She covered her mouth, whispering, "Oh my God." There was no yelling, no dramatic reaction. Just silence, crushing, heavy, undeniable silence. Finally, Emily turned to me and asked, "Why didn't you tell me all of this sooner?" "Because I needed you to see the full picture," I said. "I didn't want to just accuse them. I wanted you to decide for yourself." Owen stood and paced, shaking his head. "This isn't real. They wouldn't do this." Lauren met his eyes. They did. That night, Emily didn't sleep. The next morning, she called her parents. "We're coming over," she said. "All of us. And we're going to talk." When we arrived, Carol and Walter looked smug, confident this was just another one of their little crises to handle. "I'll be recording this," I said calmly, setting my camera on a tripod. "For the family archive." Carol bristled. "This is private family business." "Exactly," I replied. "And I'm family. We played the videos, read the transcripts, showed the emails and texts. Each time they denied something, we brought receipts. Each time they tried to twist the truth, we untwisted it." At last, Emily stood. "I love you both," she said, voice breaking. "But what you've done is disgusting. You don't get to control my life anymore." Walter looked stunned, like the wind had been knocked out of him. Carol cried, but not out of remorse. Out of loss. Loss of control. Loss of the narrative. As we left, I handed Walter a flash drive. "This is everything," I told him. "I'm not going to ruin your reputation. But if you ever try to interfere in our marriage again, I will." For the first time since we met, he looked at me not with disdain, but with something closer to fear. Or maybe respect. The morning after the confrontation with Carol and Walter, Emily sat beside me on the porch. She had his puffy but clear. She hadn't said much since the night before, but when she finally spoke, it was with quiet conviction. I feel like my whole childhood just cracked open, she whispered. And everything inside it was a lie. I didn't rush to comfort her. She didn't need comfort. She needed clarity. So I just sat there, letting the silence hold us both. Later that day, Emily made the call. She told her parents she was coming over, alone. No more games, she told them. We're going to talk. When she returned hours later, she dropped her keys on the counter and leaned against the fridge. They tried to spin it, she said. Said you were manipulating me. That you forged the video files, that Vanessa is bitter and jealous, that you planned this all to isolate me from them. She paused. But I didn't believe them. For the first time, I didn't even want to believe them. I told them they don't get to decide who I love. That if they ever try to come between us again, they won't see me or any future grandchildren ever again. I stood, ready to go to her, but she walked over and wrapped her arms around me first. I'm sorry I doubted you, she murmured. It's just, they've always been the truth in my life. And I never realized how much of it was just carefully controlled fiction. I hugged her tightly. You don't have to apologize. You just have to take back what's yours. And she did. Over the next few weeks, Emily started setting firm boundaries. She told her parents they could only contact her by text, no more phone calls or surprise visits. She and Owen began therapy together, unpacking years of manipulation they'd both normalized. She dug out old yearbooks and contacted friends she'd lost touch with, people her parents had quietly nudged away. Some responded, some didn't. But the point wasn't the outcome. It was the act of reclaiming her own story. One night, sitting on the couch, she looked over and said, I used to think being a good daughter meant keeping the peace. But peace built on fear isn't peace. It's just control. I smiled. You're starting to sound like a photographer. She laughed for the first time in days. Maybe I'm finally seeing clearly. From then on, she made it clear. No more letting her parents rewrite the narrative. She showed up as herself, not the edited version they wanted. And for the first time, she saw me, not as a wedge between her and her family, but as her partner, standing beside her through the unraveling of a false reality. The truth hurt, but it also set her free, and it made our marriage unshakable. Not perfect, but real, honest, fully ours. That evening, we arrived at Carol and Walter's house, not as guests, but as a united front. Emily walked ahead of me, her shoulders squared, jaw set with purpose. Owen and Vanessa followed close behind. The moment we stepped into the living room, the tension wrapped around us like a vice. Carol smiled too widely. Walter stood by the fireplace, swirling his whiskey like he wasn't worried. But Emily didn't waste a second. We need to talk, she said flatly. Of course, darling, Carol began, voice syrupy sweet. Let's all sit down and... Emily raised her hand. No, not this time. You don't get to steer this conversation. Walter scoffed. Is this about those ridiculous videos? Emily turned to face him directly. No, Dad. This is about everything. The manipulation, the lies, the years of planting doubt, telling me who to love, who not to trust. The way you've tried to control every major decision in my life. Walter opened his mouth to protest, but Emily pressed on. You did it with Thomas. You tried to do it with Julian, and I won't let you do it anymore. Carol's expression faltered. Sweetheart, you're emotional. He's poisoning you against us. Emily laughed. Short, sharp, bitter. You drugged my husband, Mother. The room went still. Vanessa stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. I saw it. So did Julian. And now Emily has too. Carol's mask slipped. That was a mistake? He wasn't even supposed to drink it. It was just meant to make him miss that gallery nonsense. Walter cut in. This isn't how family behaves. Emily. No, she agreed. But it's exactly how you behave. And I'm done letting it slide. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small USB drive, placing it on the coffee table. This has the footage, the lab report, the prescription records, everything. You can deny it all you want, but I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to tell you how things are going to be from now on. Walter's face darkened. Are you threatening us? No, she said, her voice calm and steady. I'm freeing myself. She turned to Owen. You can believe what you want, but I hope you see it now. They've done this to all of us. Owen stared at the floor, his fists clenched. Then Emily turned back to her parents. From now on, our relationship will be on my terms. No more guilt trips. No more meddling. If you want to be in my life, or in our future children's lives, you'll respect that. Otherwise, you'll lose us. And it won't be because of Julian. It'll be because of what you chose to do. For the first time since I'd known them, Carol and Walter had no comeback. Emily didn't wait for a reply. She took my hand and walked out, Owen and Vanessa trailing behind. In that moment, she wasn't just standing up for me. She was reclaiming herself, her voice, her boundaries, her life. And I've never been prouder to be the man standing beside her. 6 months had passed since the confrontation. Emily and I had moved forward, not in haste or resentment, but with quiet, intentional steps. Her parents, Carol and Walter, kept their distance. Occasionally, they sent carefully worded text messages or polite cards, but for once, they respected the boundaries we had set. We didn't need an apology. At this point, we knew better than to expect one. What mattered was that they had finally stopped interfering. We'd been renting a modest craftsman-style home on the edge of Asheville, close to the woods, close to my photography studio, and most importantly, far from the weight of her family's legacy. Then one morning, a certified letter arrived. It was from Walter's attorney. Inside a signed deed, Carol and Walter had quietly purchased the house we were renting and transferred ownership to Emily. There were no notes, no conditions, no letters asking for forgiveness. Just the papers, clean, legal, final. It's not an apology, I said, looking at the envelope. No, Emily replied, but it's something. That spring, we welcomed our daughter into the world, Eliza June, named after my grandmother, a woman who had raised me with steel in her spine and gentleness in her hands. Emily held Eliza with a fierceness that brought tears to my eyes. This was what we had fought for. Not just safety, but freedom. Not just love, but clarity. Carol and Walter came to visit at the hospital. They brought gifts. They cooed over the baby. But they didn't overstep. No advice. No lectures. Just quiet, tentative admiration. And when they left, Emily whispered, "That's all I ever wanted. Just respect." A few months later, I opened my own gallery in downtown Asheville. Landscapes, portraits, street scenes, my lens, my rules. Emily stood beside me at the grand opening, Eliza on her hip. Friends, clients, and neighbors came to celebrate. Toward the end of the evening, Carol and Walter stopped by. They didn't stay long. Walter looked at the photographs and nodded slowly. "You're good at this," he said. Not with arrogance, but with something resembling humility. I shook his hand and replied, "Thanks. I built this my way." As they left, Carol looked back once, almost like she wanted to say something, but then simply waved. Later that night, Emily and I sat on the porch. Eliza was asleep upstairs. The stars shimmered through the trees. "They'll never change," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "But they've stopped trying to change us. And that, after everything, was enough. We didn't need revenge. We didn't need public validation. We had built something real, a home where our daughter would grow up safe, unmanipulated, and free to choose her own life. And in a world full of control and noise, that was the loudest, strongest victory of all. That Christmas, a card arrived from Carol and Walter, handwritten and elegant as always. Inside was a simple message. "Would love to have the whole family over for Christmas Eve. A fresh start." Emily showed it to me while we were putting Eliza down for a nap. "They're trying," she said softly. I didn't disagree, but trying didn't mean trust had been rebuilt. "I'll go," I told her. "As long as we stay at a hotel, leave when we feel ready, and no alone time between them and Eliza." "Not yet." Emily nodded. That's exactly what I was thinking. Christmas Eve came. We dressed warmly and drove through the quiet streets of Asheville, Eliza gurgling in her car seat, Emily humming an old carol. The house was decorated to perfection. Warm lights glowing from every window, the scent of spiced cider drifting out the front door. They greeted us kindly. Carol even offered to take our coats. For a moment, everything felt normal. But I didn't let my guard down. Over dinner, Walter asked polite questions about the gallery. He even mentioned a recent article I'd been featured in. It wasn't the words that caught my attention. It was the tone. For the first time in years, it lacked condescension. It wasn't glowing approval, but it also wasn't dismissal. It was respect, tentative and unspoken. After dessert, Carol tried to steer Emily toward old photo albums, reminiscing about childhood memories. "You were so happy when you lived here," she said, a little too wistfully. Emily paused. She looked at me, then gently took Eliza back into her arms. "We're happy now, too, Mom," she said. "And we're not going backward." Carol didn't argue. She just smiled tightly and nodded, but I saw it, the strain of letting go. That night in the hotel, as we tucked Eliza into the portable crib, Emily turned to me. "They'll never fully change, will they?" "No," I said quietly. "But we have, and that's what matters." Establishing boundaries hadn't been about revenge or even justice. It had been about protection of our peace, our child, our marriage. We hadn't built walls to keep them out, but rather doors that we controlled, doors we could choose to open, or not. Weeks later, Walter's attorney sent a certified letter. Inside was a deed transferring ownership of our home to us, no strings attached, and legal documents establishing a trust for Eliza. There was no apology, no flowery note, just action. That was enough. We weren't asking for perfection, only respect and distance when necessary. As winter turned to spring, I realized something powerful. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means clarity, a choice to move forward without repeating the past. And that's exactly what we did. Together. 6 months after that final confrontation in Gerald and Carol's living room, life had settled into something steady, something ours. Emily and I welcomed Eliza into the world on a golden summer afternoon. She was perfect. Bright-eyed, loud-lunged, and completely unaware of the storm we'd weathered, just to protect her future. We named her after my grandmother, the one who taught me that real strength doesn't roar. It endures. Carol and Gerald visited the hospital. They brought gifts, stayed for less than 20 minutes, and didn't offer unsolicited advice. It was the most respectful visit they'd ever made. Not because they had suddenly become different people, but because they knew, at last, that the rules had changed. 3 months later, I opened my photography gallery in downtown Asheville. It had taken years of hustling, sleepless nights, missed holidays, and countless miles across backcountry roads. But now it was real. Mine. The grand opening was filled with clients, local artists, friends, and even my parents who flew in from Oregon to see what their son had built. Emily stood by my side, holding Eliza on her hip. Our little family. Late in the evening, Gerald and Carol arrived, not as royalty sweeping into a room, but as guests. They didn't stay long. Gerald shook my hand, nodded at the landscapes and portraits hanging on the walls. "Strong work," he said simply. I nodded back. "Thank you." That was it. No performance, no attempt to reassert control, just acknowledgement. Weeks later, a large envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a glossy copy of Gerald's investment firm's annual report. Throughout the brochure were my photographs, commissioned quietly, licensed legally. At the end, a handwritten note in stiff cursive. "Hired the best photographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy." I didn't call to thank him. He didn't ask for one. We both understood. This wasn't about reconciliation or forgiveness. It was something quieter, rarer. Respect. Emily and I didn't celebrate with champagne. We celebrated by taking Eliza to the park that Sunday, pushing her stroller along the riverwalk, watching the leaves begin to turn. Success, I realized, wasn't about approval from people who never really saw you. It was about living without apology, loving without fear, building something that couldn't be taken away by silence or manipulation. I hadn't won because I'd exposed Gerald and Carol's manipulation. I'd won because I stopped playing their game altogether. I didn't burn bridges. I built a life too far for them to reach. That, I think, is the best kind of revenge, not revenge at all, but a life well lived. A year after the night my in-laws tried to tear our marriage apart, I found myself standing in the center of my own photography gallery, surrounded by people who believed in my work and in me. Gerald and Carol were there too, But this time, there were no backhanded compliments, no veiled criticisms, just quiet nods of approval. They'd learned, the hard way, that their control over Emily's life was over. What changed? Not them. Me. I stopped chasing their approval. I stopped playing by their rules. I started living by mine, with integrity, patience, and purpose. And in the end, they had no choice but to accept what they couldn't crush my worth. My family and the life we were building, they didn't apologize. They never will. But their silence and distance, that's the clearest acknowledgement I ever needed. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's not about proving someone wrong to their face. It's about proving to yourself that you were right all along, that your value doesn't depend on being accepted by people who can't see your worth. Live well. Live honestly. Let your life be the loudest answer to those who doubted you. We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever faced judgment or disapproval from family just for being yourself? Share your story in the comments. It might just give someone the courage they need today. And if this story moved you, tap that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a powerful life story again. We share real stories about resilience, dignity, and finding peace on your own terms, stories that matter, especially as we get older and wiser. Because sometimes, the best part of the story is what comes after the struggle.